name's Nick. Welcome to my video on OCD. I'm going to try and run a series of short videos about OCD and my experiences with it. I'm not suggesting that everybody's are the same or that OCD is the same in all of its forms, because it takes many. But I am going to talk about my experiences and struggles over the years and give you a little bit of history about what it's done to me, what it's done to my life, what it's taught me, what it's taken from me, but also what it's given to me. Because whilst it is an incredibly debilitating condition to live with and a hugely misunderstood condition, it also has, in a strange sort of way, over the long term, some positives as well. One of them, very briefly before I go into the details of it all, is something that I think we're all becoming more aware of, but something that we all need to be aware of, and that is that everybody, no matter who they are, is carrying a hidden burden. It doesn't matter what that burden might be. Everybody is coping with something that either they're struggling with or they are on the edge of struggling with, shall we say. Most of those things are invisible, most of them you can't see, and most of those things, it has to be said, people don't tend to discuss. That could be for a number of reasons, and certainly with OCD, I didn't used to discuss it with anyone. Because how can you describe something that is so difficult to put into words for yourself? But this is the case for most people, and that is why we have to treat everybody with as much kindness as we can. Because a lot of these things, OCD being one of them, can create in you a natural self-defense mechanism that can come across as somebody who's a little bit aloof, possibly slightly antisocial, avoids social situations, maybe even avoids catching up with friends. But a lot of that has to do, certainly in my case, that had to do with the fact, and still has to do with the fact, that I'm struggling to deal with the repetitive behaviour, the obsessive thoughts, and it's just easier if I deal with them on my own, away from people. So before we get into my story, because that's what I want to discuss briefly in this first video, it's important that I just do a bit of housekeeping and address what it is I'm talking about when I say OCD. I'm not talking about a need for things to be in the right order, or a need for things to be of the same colour or in a straight line. I'm talking about debilitating, overwhelming thoughts or feelings that are perceived as having a very negative effect on either oneself or the people that one loves. In my case, the thoughts that plague me, and have done continually since I was 14, take the form of, my loved ones dying, and the consequence of me not performing my ritualistic obsessive behaviour is that those people will die. I am convinced of it by my thoughts. Now, convinced of it to a point. I've spent, as I'm sure most people have, who have this condition, many hours of my life trying to figure out what the hell is happening to me and how I can lessen its effects. The difficult thing, I think, for anybody with this condition is that there isn't a lot of help out there. Or at least there's a lot of people who want to help, but there's not a great deal of help that makes a difference, not a positive one. And if you try and get advice, because it's such a mysterious condition, it's very difficult for anybody to actually dial into what you're feeling. And without that, they can't offer you any kind of relief. So in my case, the repetitive habits were an attempt to lessen the feelings of anxiety and fear that I began to feel in my early teens, when things at home started to become unstable. My home life was not a particularly happy one at that stage, and the fear from a seeming loss of control of home life, of, at that time, school life, of family life, gave rise to a need to try and control it, which is, particularly when you're 14, impossible. But you take on that burden, and the very difficult thing about OCD is that you feel that you do have the responsibility of making things better for everyone. And you feel, irrationally or otherwise, that you might just have the solution to it. And it starts off, at least for myself, almost as a positive thing. I remember feeling very powerful when I first started having the repetitive behaviour, because I felt that the repetitive behaviour was a ritual that I could use to undo a situation that was bad. And whatever course we were travelling on, I could stop us, pause it, and I could create an alternative timeline, so to speak. That very quickly changed, very quickly. But, you know, the loss of control in my life came from natural causes. That's what I couldn't accept at the time. Everything in life changes at some point, either for the better or for the worse. But even if it is for the worse, or seems to be, you know, things turn out strangely to often be better than the thing that you feared losing, if that makes sense. And the thing is that these changes that were happening to me, that I was trying to avoid, that I was trying to control, the events that I felt uncomfortable living through at that point, they would have passed naturally anyhow. And they would have passed with no less pain. In fact, probably quite a lot less pain, because the rituals, the thoughts are like a prison. They're like a cage. And it's a very lonely place. It's a very lonely place to be, because you can't get out of it and nobody can help you out of it. It's very much a cyclical condition. So I certainly know from my own experience, but also from the experience of other people who have similar conditions, that it waxes and wanes. Sometimes it is copable. And when it's copable, you can almost look upon your past behaviour with ridicule. How was I so convinced by it all? Why was I so lost in all of that? But then, for no apparent reason, you will begin to cycle into a pattern of obsessive behaviour that you can't get out of. I know for myself, it was very similar to the cycle of addiction. So the interesting thing about the cycle of repetitive behaviour and the cycle of repetitive thoughts is that they are all, when you actually look at them from a distance, self-perpetuating. Because once you have performed those rituals for enough years of your life, the subconscious response to the ritual itself is anxiety. So whatever anxiety you're trying to free yourself from is actually increased by your ritual rather than decreased. It may feel to a point as if you are reducing your anxiety, but certainly in my case, it just became a tighter and tighter spiral. I have actually written some notes, which I hope you don't mind me referring to, because there's an awful lot to remember with regard to this condition, that I had to sit down and I had to really think about how it feels, because I'm so used to it. I'm 47 this year, and I think I was 14 when this began. So that's an awful lot of my life, thinking the way I do, feeling the way I do, and responding to anxiety the way that I do. And I've noticed that the pattern of OCD seems to take, in my case, two forms. You have the rituals and the thoughts that are as a result of an anxiety that you're feeling, an insecurity or a fear of losing someone, in my case losing someone that I love, or losing something that I know gives me stability and happiness. And then you have a second form, which is the habitual obsessive behaviour that's not necessarily accompanied by thoughts. And it's just as a result of having done it for so long. If there's a ritual that I have upon leaving a room, I sometimes find myself doing it without even feeling anxiety, without even having a thought that I'm trying to cancel. It's become so habitual. So it becomes very ingrained, and anybody who's experienced it will know that. I just wanted to talk very briefly. I'm not going to go on too long in this video, but I will do more videos and cover hopefully some techniques to help reduce the anxiety if you are struggling, that have worked for me, and I hope that they will work for other people. But this video is really about understanding what OCD really is, what it really is. But I can only obviously speak for myself. I do understand that this is a very complex condition. It takes many forms, and people who struggle with it in so many different ways that it's almost unique to everyone. But perhaps by giving my account, perhaps by talking about my experiences, it might help one or two of you to find a way of lessening the grip that it has on you, even if that's only occasionally. Because for me, it is the first thought that comes in my head in the morning. It's the last thought I have when I go to bed at night. It's with me all day, every day, no matter what, no matter whether I'm feeling good or whether I'm feeling rubbish. It's there like a shadow over everything. And I know that for me, over the course of certainly my teens and 20s, it took away most of the joy that I should have been experiencing. Being out with friends, having a good time. None of those things mattered to me. All that mattered to me was that I protected the people that I felt I was, by that point, putting in jeopardy. But back in 1994-5, there wasn't really a great deal of help for any of these things. There wasn't. The techniques that you could use were pretty limited. So a calm mind reduces OCD, and for me, a calm mind is something that I basically have been in pursuit of ever since. It's something that I found through meditation a long time ago, and some very good friends of mine helped me to learn how to wind back and relax and go into myself and see the problem from a distance. Now, that's not something that you can instantly do. I understand that. It's something that has to be worked on, but some of the techniques that I'm hoping to show you in the videos to come might help you to do that and to reach that place. Because I can remember the first time that I ever reached that point within myself that was totally calm and without thought. And because it was without thought, it was without consequence. There was no responsibility on me, and I was totally, I think it was Ramana Maharshi who said, it may have been someone else, that peace is happiness at rest. And that's where I was in that moment, and I've never forgotten it. And I've been back there many times through meditative techniques. I'm not suggesting meditation is for everyone, but just as an example, ultimately, regardless of the technique, the message that is very difficult to believe when you are in a cycle of OCD, when you are in that spiral and you can't get out, it's hard to hear what I'm about to say, but the truth of the matter is that none of the rituals work. The realization of this for me was profound. Now, it didn't stop the rituals and it didn't stop the thoughts, but it helped me to perhaps get a little bit stronger. Saying that is a little bit like going to the end of the story first, but I just wanted to conclude this video by dropping that in there, because it is ultimately the truth, regardless of what we feel or what we think or how convinced we are by it. I would say that my OCD was about as extreme as it could get. Certainly at times in my life, I don't think it could have become any more extreme, to the point that I was verging on being institutionalized. So I know how bad it can get, and I'm not trying to belittle or downplay anybody's experiences. But the truth is, first of all, the rituals do not work. And second of all, nothing that is in your head is actually your responsibility. So difficult perhaps to hear, but the understanding of that came to me when I looked back on my teenage years and looked at all of the chaos that I tried to stop, all of the chaos that I tried to avoid, happened anyway. It happened anyway, it passed. A lot of it turned into situations that the control I was trying to gain over my childhood life that I could never have gained because I was a child, led to situations where I grew up and I had choices. And one of the choices I had to make was to not let this condition ruin everything. But I couldn't deny that nothing had changed what happened. Nothing had changed the loss of my home, the terrible situation at home, the moving schools, the no friends. Nothing had changed that. None of my rituals had changed that. They'd made it worse. I had to live through it anyway. But I'd lived through it with carrying an almost unbearable burden. So it sounds glib to say it's not your fault. That's not really what I mean, but that's the sentence that comes into my head about me all the time. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. Just like that scene in a very well-known film with Robin Williams and Matt Damon. The responsibility was never on me. And by the way, nothing that I did in my head or my rituals ever worked. It didn't change a damn thing, except to make my life harder. So in the next video, having introduced who I am, what I am here to talk about, I am going to be talking about some techniques and talking about some experiences to back up why those techniques worked, some experiences that I've had. I hope you found what I've said helpful. I would love to hear your comments about your experiences and anything that you do that really helps you to find some peace. Bye for now.